Hi, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about the top 5 ways I own your internal network. My name is Heath Adams. Quick, who am I? So I am a husband, got my wife here with me, hacker, veteran, gamer, sports fan, and animal dad. I am a former accountant turned cybersecurity geek, so was an accountant, hated it, and then decided that I was going to become a penetration tester, so here I am. On the day-to-day, I am a senior security engineer and a business owner at TCM Security, and I run 2 projects. So project 1 is called VeteranSec, or VetSec. That is a nonprofit, so if anybody in here is a military veteran or even in the military, basically it is a Slack channel that they're closing in on 1,000 members now. So it's just a place to network with other people who are in the same position, interested in cybersecurity. You know, there's old hats in there that work in the field, or people still trying to get in the field. People transitioning out as well. So it's a good resource for military veterans. The other project that I run is called the Cyber Mentor. So that's my YouTube/Twitch personality. So if you're interested in becoming a penetration tester, there's a lot of videos on that, a lot of how-to guides, and a lot of advice there. So we do weekly streams usually on Twitch, and most of my content gets uploaded to YouTube. So you can check me out, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, at the Cyber Mentor. And then the blogs, I write for veteransec.com and then business website of tcm-sec.com. So why this talk? So there's 3 reasons. There's the offensive side of things, which is, how can we leverage these attacks inside of a network? And the defensive side is how can we defend against those? And the overall big thing is awareness. So if you're not on offense, you're not on defense, at least knowing about these, even in your personal life, some of these tips in this talk can really help you out. So with that being said, so we're saying internal, that means inside of a network. So there's usually 2 types of network penetration tests. One's external, that's kind of hacking from the outside. Internal's hacking from the inside. So typically you place a laptop on site or a Dropbox, but we can say assume breach, somehow we got in. Regardless, we're inside the network. So that's what we're defining here for this talk. So this talk is also based on my experience as pen tester. If you're a pen tester, you've been doing it, your top 5 may vary. This is just what I've seen when I've been doing pen tests. And then please hold any questions until after the end. You can come see me. I have stickers if you want stickers. So the first one is LLMNR poisoning. So what is LLMNR? That is link local multicast name resolution. So it is basically acts as DNS when DNS fails to do so. It was previously known as what's called MBTNS, NetBIOS. So the key flaw here is that when the service utilizes a user's hash to actually respond to. So you'll see here in an example, when we use a tool called Responder, we can actually capture NTL and V2 hashes, and we can take those offline, try to crack them, and do some other malicious things with them here. So let's take a look at an overview of this. So let's say that we have a victim, and this victim is trying to connect to a file share, and that file share is called HackMe. But for whatever reason, they type in HackM. DNS doesn't know what HackM is. And the server doesn't know what HackM is, so it's going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. So as the victim, we're going to send out a broadcast message to everybody, and we're going to say, hey, does anybody know how to connect to this? And we're going to be sitting in the middle with Responder. We're going to respond to that. We're going to say, yeah, I do. Send me your credentials. I'll get you over there. And then the victim's going to send over the hash. So let's take a look at what that looks like from a real-life perspective. So this is what Responder looks like, with just a Python tool. We'll run Responder. We'll listen for these events on the network. And this is something that, as an attacker, if we're doing a penetration test, this is probably one of the first things I run before I do scanning, before I do anything. I'm running this because around 8 o'clock, when people are getting in, a lot of traffic. Around lunchtime, a lot of traffic. Events are generated, and we start pulling in hashes pretty easily. So let's say an event occurs. Here's, again, somebody trying to access a file share that they can't access. And we get a hash. So old Frank Castle here on the Marvel domain, we can see his IP address, his domain, and his username, and you get this really long hash. So what we could do with that hash is we could take it and we can put it into something like Hashcat, and if your password's weak, we're going to crack it. So you can see password 1 here, we get it cracked, and no problem. Now we have Frank. We could try to pass that password around the network or do other malicious items, which we'll talk about here in a second. So when we talk about mitigation with this, the best defense is to turn off LLMNR and MBTNS. You got to turn them both off because you can only turn one or the other. They'll still be in play. If the company cannot, for whatever reason, turn these things off, then we do recommend network access control, so at least that there's some prevention on site, and we require strong passwords. So ideally, the password policy, and you should utilize this in anything, is at least 14 characters, if not longer. The longer and more complex without using common words. So the longest password I've cracked is 19 characters, and that's because it was a Bible verse. So just because it's long doesn't mean it's good, and just because it's complex doesn't mean it's long enough. So we really need that length plus that complexity. If you got like a 40 character sentence or something crazy, that'll work really really well. So it doesn't have to be crazy complex if you got length, but you do have to have the length there for us to be able to not crack these. So moving on into number 2. Number 2 is pass the password or pass the hash. So if we do crack a password, or we can dump SAM hashes, we can leverage these for lateral movement in the network. And so here's what pass the password looks like. You see that we are passing this password now of the user fcastle with the Marvel domain, and we're taking that password 1 that we found. And all we're doing is we're spraying the entire subnet to see if that password works on any other machines, because we know it works on his machine. But what about everywhere else? So if he is a local administrator on another machine, you're going to see that pwned light up there. And basically, we can go access that machine as that user and gain a shell on that machine as well. So you see this a lot in networks, password reuse big time, especially local administrators or like a tech support account. There was a pen test a couple weeks ago I had that had CyberArk on it. And all their passwords were insanely long, weren't cracking them, but their local passwords were really bad, and they were reusing them all over the place. So we were able to leverage those to get around the network. Even though they had amazing, spent millions of dollars on security, the local administrator side of it really took them down. So other option here is we can get the hash. So say we do have a shell, say we grabbed the shell, and we can dump that administrator, that fcastle, or if there's an administrator hash that hasn't been disabled, we could dump that hash, and we could also run that through crackmap exec here. And same thing, instead of supplying the the domain, we're just going to supply a local user hash with capital H and -- local, fire that away, and see where we own. The only machine that we owned here was his own, so we didn't really get anywhere, but a lot of times this does work. So when we talk about pass the hash, pass the password, when it comes to mitigation, these are hard to completely prevent, but we can do some things to make it more difficult. So one thing is to limit account reuse. So if you've got local administrators, really don't give people local administrators unless they absolutely need it, and there's not really a good reason for a lot of people to have it. Another thing is disabling that guest and administrator account and just limiting access. And again, limit who is a local administrator, least privilege here. A lot of users want that to install stuff, and it just ends up bad for more reasons than just this. So that's one reason. Another mitigation is to utilize strong passwords again. So if we can't crack a password or even get onto a machine, then it's going to be really hard for us to actually pass a password around in the first place. And the last one is PAM. So I talked about CyberArk. So PAM's privilege access management. Basically, that's like an account check-in, check-out thing. So you store your accounts in something like CyberArk, and then you go and you log in. You say, I want to check this account out. You check that account out, it belongs to you, it gives you a password that's like 15 to 30 characters long, and you own that account with that password for 8 hours or so, and then it checks itself back in if you don't check it back in. So that password's always rotating. So even if we get onto a machine, we dump hashes, dump passwords, they're constantly rotating, we're not going to be able to do anything. So that's why when I was in that engagement, at least on the Active Directory side of things, I had no chance against cracking those accounts. They were way too long, way too complex. But again, the local admin accounts can be dangerous. So third one is what is called token impersonation. So those are temporary keys that allow you access to a system. And you could think of these basically as cookies. These are cookies for your computer. So there are two types that you can see. One is called delegate. The other one is called impersonate. So delegate is like you logged in with remote desktop. You're going to leave a delegate token behind. The other one is non-interactive. So if you have like a network drive or some kind of logon script that you use, then you're going to leave behind an impersonate cookie. Now, these cookies stay there as long as that computer has not been restarted. So if you have a computer up and you call help desk is domain admin, they log into your computer through remote desktop, you're leaving behind a delegate token as that user. So let's take a look at why it's bad. So let's say we get onto a system, and at the top you can see that we are authority system, so we own the machine. But there are tokens available to impersonate here with this tool called Incognito. This is actually built into Metasploit or Meterpreter. So I'm going to impersonate this user of Marvel F Castle. And we're going to go into a shell. We're going to say, who am I? And now we are Marvel F Castle. Great. From here, I'm going to try to run Mimikatz, which is just going to try to dump passwords. So I'm trying to dump passwords off of the domain controller. And if this is domain administrator, this might be able to work for us. Here, you see that we have an access denied. The access is denied because Frank Castle is not actually a domain administrator. But what if a domain admin token was available? So now you see that the administrator has remote desktoped in this machine, left the token behind, and we're going to go ahead and impersonate that token. And now we say, who am I? Marvel administrator. Try this one more time, and we just dump all the hashes. And in this sense, we basically own everything. We can take these offline and try to crack them. This Kerberos ticket granting ticket hash can lead to what is called a golden ticket attack, and that we own every single computer in the network with that golden ticket attack, at least in the domain. So big deal if you capture that hash there. And so when we talk about mitigation, we can limit the user group tokens here. A bigger strategy is account tiering. So you'll see some places utilize this, and more are moving to it. But like you might have Bob, and Bob's a domain admin. So Bob will have a regular account, user account, and then he'll have a domain admin account. And that domain admin account only logs into the domain administrator or like domain controller or where they're needed, and they won't be utilizing that to log into something like a user's computer or a server or something else. They'll be using their local account to do that, or their local or their domain user account to do it, not a domain admin account. So again, local admin account restriction is big here because we need a system shell to actually pull this off. So if we're not a system on the account, like a highest level, then we're not going to be able to pull this off. And the reason we get the high level system access is when a user is a local administrator. So once we get that local administrator shell, then we own this. We can start doing token impersonation, and this attack becomes pretty dangerous. So number 4. So this plays back into number 1. Number 1 was LLMNR, and if you remember, we actually gathered the hashes, took them offline, and cracked them. Instead of doing that, we can actually pass these hashes and just do what's called a relay. So we're going to use SMB relay attack. So there's 2 requirements here. So one thing is that SMB signing has to be disabled. Good thing for us is SMB signing is disabled by default on all workstations. Servers, it is enabled. So basically that SMB signing says you are who you say you are. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pass this hash along and say, hey, we are this person, let us into your machine. If that person is a local admin on that machine, we can dump hashes, we can get a shell. There's a lot of malicious things that we can do with this. So again, we need that signing to be disabled. So this is mainly a lateral movement attack. And then we need that local admin privilege again. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So a couple things we're going to turn off in the responder configuration. We're going to turn off SMB and HTTP because we're actually going to pass those along instead of actively listening. We're going to run responder again. Just this time you can see there's a little bit more red in the offs down there in the middle under the servers we're listening on. And we're also going to spin up what's called NTLM relay x.py, another part of this Impacket toolkit. All these tools I've been using here are part of Impacket toolkit for the most part. So we're going to specify a target file, and we're just going to let it fly. So again, when an event occurs like this, instead of the hash coming to us, the hash goes to that machine that we specify in the targets file. And if that user is a local admin, you can see down there, we just accessed another machine, Peter Parker's machine, and we started dumping all the hashes on Peter Parker's machine. So now we've got new hashes available to us, so we can go and try to pass around, see maybe where Peter Parker has access to, repeat step 2 that we saw, and keep trying to move laterally along until we find that domain credential or something that we can get access to inside the network. So a lot of this is about lateral movement until you find that way to escalate up. So there's a bunch of different strategies we can have here. The enabling SMB signing will stop this attack. You will have some admins complain about that because there is what they say it's about a 15% increase in the time it takes to transfer a file to a file share off of a file share. But for security purposes, I don't think that's that bad. You can also disable NTLM authentication, but if you use that, it stops the attack. But if If that fails and it falls back to Kerberos, then it's going to be happening all over the place again. So again, we could talk about account tiering. If we're not utilizing domain administrator accounts or utilizing those on machines, we're still going to have issues with this. And the local admin restriction, if we're not a local admin, we can't have this happen. So again, it all plays down to these local admins, and a lot of it's local admin and password is really how we navigate these networks. Okay, and the last one is Kerberosing. So Kerberos is an authentication method for Windows. That's how you use it in a domain. So let's talk about how it works, and we'll talk about why this is bad. So we have a domain controller, and we call that domain controller the KDC, which is the Key Distribution Center. And if we have a valid credential, so say Frank Castle with password 1, we can request what's called a TGT. That's a ticket granting ticket. So we, as the user, can say, hey, KDC, I want to request a ticket. The KDC is going to send back that ticket to us, and we're going to have a ticket. Then we say, okay, there's maybe an application server or something like a SQL server, whatever it is, or something running that we maybe want access to. Now, what these have is what's called a service principal name, or an SPN. So say we want to access this application server, we're going to ask for a service ticket, or a TGS. So we're going to take that, we're going to say, hey, domain controller, here's my ticket, my TGT. Can you give me a TGS while you're at it? And the domain controller is going to say, sure. And while I'm at it, since I have no idea if you can authenticate to that, I'm going to encrypt the hash of that server account, or that account, with this ticket. So then what you're going to do is you're going to present that ticket to the application server. It's going to decrypt it, check your permissions, and then say if yes, you can access me, or no, you can't access me. We never need to do 5 and 6. Because we have valid authentication, or we have a valid ticket, we just get that ticket back with that encrypted hash, and then we take it offline and try to crack it. So let's take a look at this and make more sense of it. So we've got this Marvel Frank Castle with password 1. And the domain controller is living at 10.0.3.4, and we're just making a request. And what comes down here are you see the service principal names. So there is one SQL server running here, a SQL service running, and you can see the member of, it says domain admins. All the time we see this. People put service accounts in their domain admins, and if we're able to now take this hash that we just got, because this happens regardless, as long as we have a valid ticket, we have this hash. We can go take it offline. If we can crack it, we now own a domain admin account. So take this offline. This is a 14-character password. Again, this is why even 14 characters isn't that great, because this will run with RockU and crack it. So crack this password, and we can take that and leverage it. So when it comes to mitigation strategies, really, because this is a feature built into Windows already, you need strong passwords, really strong passwords for your service accounts. And again, it comes down to least privilege with all this. Questions? Good. Thank you, guys.